Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. My intention, or I should say, our intention this evening is to spend a little bit of time about how you got here, revisiting some of the things that you received earlier in the process. Spending most of the time talking about where you are and the tools that you have to kind of answer the questions that you may have, to take a look at accounts, to make payments, to kind of do all of those things. We'll take a look at the tools firsthand that you have access to answer those questions. And then if we've got time, we can spend a little bit of time about talking about where we go from here, meaning everything we'll talk about is essentially uh, relevant to both this fall and the coming spring, and then what happens after that. But again, my name is Chris Summers, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here, and I'm going to share my screen here so we can go ahead and get started. What you should be seeing is a PowerPoint presentation, which looks like it's showing sorry, give me just a moment. Looks like it was showing the backbone and not the presentation itself. So I promise I'm not going to spend 50 minutes here talking on a PowerPoint. What I wanted to use the PowerPoint to at least kind of get us going about your statement and payment options. So I mentioned at the very beginning, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how you got here. So, you know, with the admission offering that you received, should have produced a financial aid letter, which was probably kind of your introduction to costs at Oglethorpe and how much of those costs were going to be covered by scholarships, grants, and if you chose them, Stafford loans. But let's take a look at kind of the baseline charges for the 2021-2022 academic year. So I say baseline charges because if you're in the traditional undergraduate program and you're attending as a full-time student, you should see $21,237 in tuition per semester. So when I say per semester, and all of the things that I'm going to list here are going to be per semester. Essentially, that means that you'll see them for the fall, you will see them again in the spring. So they are charged essentially for the 4 months of each semester. But each student who's full-time should be looking at $21,237 in tuition per semester. I also want to spend just a moment talking about full-time and what that means. Full-time is a student who's taking anywhere between 12 and 19 credit hours. So when I say that, what that means in terms of tuition is if you're taking any schedule in between that range, your tuition should stay the same. The tuition for anything in between 12 and 19 hours is going to be this 21,237. For being a full-time student, you should also be looking at an activity fee, which is essentially a fee that is voted on by your student government. And the student government uses this fee to kind of help put on activities for the entire campus. But all full-time students are assessed an activity fee for each semester. You'll also see an orientation fee on your statement for the fall semester, which is actually only charged once. And it's not just charged once for the year, it's charged once during your time at Oglethorpe. You'll only see this fee during the fall semester. You will not see it again. It's essentially for your first weekend on campus where there are a lot of special activities to integrate you to the campus and kind of introduce you to the community at large. I will also say with the orientation fee that the deposit that you paid to reserve your spot in the class has already rolled into your account to essentially take care of this fee. So the $250 orientation fee and the $300 deposit you paid earlier in the admission cycle kind of cancel each other out, leave you with $50 actually in on the positive side. And the last thing that I've got on here is room and board, which I will say I have got one rate of room and board on here. The actual rate of room and board that you're paying depends, number one, if you're staying on campus. If you're not staying on campus, you shouldn't see room and board on your account. But the rate of room and board on your bill should actually be tied very specifically to your room. What I've got on here is consistent with the rooms in Trayer Hall. But if you're staying somewhere other than Trayer Hall, you probably got a different rate of room and board on your statement. But your statement should include some variation of these charges and something that's similar to this total, unless you're commuting and then room and board wouldn't apply. So that should be kind of the baseline charges that you're going to see on your statement for the fall semester. I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about some other common questions that we, excuse me, hopefully you can still hear me. I just knocked my earbuds and microphone. Can I get a thumbs up if anybody can still hear me? Okay, good. I see a hand raised. Thanks, Katie. So a couple of other just common questions that we get in the financial aid area and kind of in the financial arena overall. So the aid that you're looking at on the statement this time of the year will be flagged as pending. And pending is okay at this time on the calendar. Pending is where your aid is supposed to be. Pending is essentially a recognition that the aid has been approved, that you have done what you needed to do to be awarded that dollar amount. And if your aid is pending, it should be reducing your net balance. If you do not see aid as pending, it is not helping your net balance. I mentioned a little bit about the definition of a full-time student, which is essentially anything 12 hours and above. But if you are in a situation where it is not going to be good for you to take 12 hours. If you have a very specific reason that you've documented with the university where you really need to be part-time, that's absolutely fine. However, please understand that everything up to this point has been built on the assumption that you are going to be a full-time student. If a student is part-time, it's going to affect both tuition and financial aid. So if you're in a position where you have to be part-time in the fall semester, let's please talk about that, because that's going to have a ripple effect across your entire financial account. And then I also like to highlight the drop ad deadline. The drop ad deadline, essentially until that date, schedules are somewhat fluid. So if you're putting together your schedule and you had some schedule changes that you would like to try to make, you can make those changes with your advisor. If you want to add coursework, if you want to subtract coursework, your schedule is somewhat fluid through the drop ad period. And the drop ad period ends at 5 p.m. on September the 3rd. From that point forward, the schedule that's on your record is going to essentially drive your tuition and fee charges. And it's also going to be the number of hours that you're attempting for the fall semester. So understand that you can make changes on your schedule until 5 p.m. on September 3rd. And at that point, your schedule becomes a bit more concrete. That is also the period at which we start to disperse financial aid, because if you're making schedule changes, we don't want to be posting financial aid to your account if you plan to make changes. So once we get past September 3rd, that's when we start to shift the aid from pending to actually posting it to your account. Okay. Oh, excuse me. This is not what I wanted. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second, although I'll take a beat. Katie, are there any questions that we would want to jump in and answer immediately about what I just mentioned?
Let's see. One of the questions that we have from a couple people is kind of how fluid the bill is if things change. So for instance, if housing gets changed to a different place, would that affect their bill and change it?
The short answer is yes, absolutely. If you are whatever your housing situation is now. And I say it that way because if you are currently commuting and you want to investigate living on campus, you have that option. If you're currently living on campus and you want to look at commuting, if you're living within 25 miles and commuting from home, that's an option. If you're living on campus and you want to look at another dorm room, that might be an option. All of those things are things you can investigate until essentially the drop ad period, yes. Housing's a little bit different because housing is based on a daily rate, meaning when you move in, you start accumulating charges for housing. So if you spend 4 days in a residence hall and then move out, you probably have to pay for those 4 days. But the general idea is there, and that your bill is somewhat fluid, through the drop ad period. I'll give you a more concrete example. If you are currently planning to major in biology, and you have courses on your schedule for the fall that come with lab fees, and you decide later on this semester that you might want to go in a different direction and you drop those courses with lab fees, your bill will change accordingly. You'll see those lab fees absent from your bill after you drop the courses. The same thing in the opposite direction if you add courses with lab fees. So thanks for giving me a question real quick while I made a pivot there. Actually, what I wanted to do was get away from the slideshow and go right into Oasis. So mentioned kind of some of the foundational things about what we're looking at, the standard charges. But at this point in the calendar, you should be able to take a look at your account, your information, everything that currently is feeding your account should be creating a bill. And where you would start to look at your current bill and your current financial aid information is Oasis. Oasis is essentially the student system. Students have access to Oasis, and Oasis is going to be the way that students register for classes for all future terms. It's going to be where they can find their live bills. It's going to be where they can find, or where they can access their live bill. It's going to be where they can look at their award letters. Essentially, if you want to take a look at your student record, Oasis is going to be the landing page. And as deposited enrolling students for the fall semester, you should have access to Oasis. If you don't have access to Oasis, then I would encourage you to reach out to our IT services office, or actually, Katie, if you want to chime in here, your admission counselor may be able to help you out with that as well. But you will certainly want to plug into Oasis, because Oasis is going to be kind of the gateway to a lot of what we're going to spend the rest of this webinar talking about.
I'll point out that what's my password button down at the bottom, that's super useful. And then if you ever have an IT problem, helpdesk@oglethorpe.edu is our IT department. I will put that email in the chat as well.
Thanks, Katie. So I am going to log into a sample record here. I will say that currently Oasis kind of has two different looks. I say that because this is essentially like an Oasis landing page. This is oasis.oglethorpe.edu. And this, like Katie said, you can come here to reset your password. There are some things that you can come in here to do. I'm going to go to the student menu. What you will find, though, is a lot of the links on this landing page are going to take you to a different, fresher, mobile-friendly version of Oasis, which probably before you graduate will become the only version of Oasis you see. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the financial aid homepage, which is going to bring up essentially kind of the financial aid homepage. It's going to be where you would come to take a look at a summary of your financial aid information. And what you should find on this page is a checklist of maybe some of the things that you need and some of the things that are done. What I really want to spend time focusing on this page in particular is how you take a look at your award letter and what Oasis is trying to tell you with your award letter. So to take a look at your award letter, you want to access the My Awards page in Oasis. And that can either be accessed by clicking on this top menu here. This top menu gives you all of your options, My Awards being one of them. You can click on the side menu over here, and you should have an expansion for kind of the same menu options. And then actually My Awards is also behind this review and accept your financial aid award package on the checklist. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the My Awards page. What the My Awards page should be showing you is your award letter. And it should be showing you the amount the student's been awarded for the year, how much is contributing towards the fall, how much is contributing towards the spring, and maybe I don't want to say most importantly, but what I'll spend a little time talking about is the status. So everything that you see on your award letter that has either an accepted or pending status is then going to reflect into your bill. Anything that's got an accepted or pending status is going to help reduce or is already going to help reduce your net balance. So the sample award letter that I've got pulled up here, all of these awards are going to help reduce this student's balance. I'll give you an example of something that is not currently helping to reduce the student's balance. So in this case, and for many of you, you may have been awarded Stafford loans, and whether or not you want to use the Stafford loans is entirely your choice. The reason that you have Stafford loans on your award letter is you filed a FAFSA. The FAFSA told us essentially that you were eligible for Stafford loans, told us essentially kind of how much you were eligible to receive for the year, and we've added that to your award letter. Now, from that point forward, whether or not you want to use those is up to you. I know a lot of you used the financial aid award letter acceptance form on your Petrel portal. And we found that some of the submissions through that form hadn't made their way into Oasis and on your bills. So if you accepted your Stafford loans through that form, you may want to go back because we made some kind of brought a few accounts up to speed earlier today. So you may want to double check and see if your Stafford loans are on there. But if you earlier had said you wanted the Stafford loans through the Petrel portal, and they're probably in here as either pending or accepted, if you use that form to reject your Stafford loans, that's fine. You probably will find the corresponding status here. I picked this record, I picked our sample student here for a very specific reason, and that is this student basically hasn't told us one way or the other. We don't know if this student wants their Stafford loans. That is fine. I do want to highlight the fact that unless a student explicitly tells us, I want my Stafford loans, they're not going to make their way onto the bill. We're definitely not going to be accepting loans or disbursements unless we know very clearly from the student wants those. So if you log into Oasis and you go to My Awards and you find that your Stafford loans are in an estimated status, what you can do is you can drill down and it'll tell you, okay, well, you've been awarded up to $2,750 for the fall and up to $2,750 for the spring. You can change these numbers. If you only want $1,000 for the fall, you can do that. If you only want $500 for the spring, you can do that. You can accept the entire amount as it's written here. You can decline the entire amount as it's written here. Those options are up to you. One thing you can't do with Oasis, though, is you can't increase your Stafford loans. The amount that you've been awarded is specific to where you are towards your degree. So I would think that everybody on this call is probably a first-year student. First-year students are eligible for up to $5,500 in Stafford loans outside of kind of some special conditions. So what you'll likely find on here is that you're eligible for a total of $5,500 in Stafford loans. And if they're estimated, if you want to come in here and accept or decline them in whatever way and capacity you choose, that would be great. If you do nothing and they stay in an estimated status, they're not going to show up on your bill and we're not going to process any loan disbursements. I'm going to pause for a sec. Any questions that we can jump into at this point, Katie?
Sure can. So we have some students asking kind of about outside scholarships and how those might be reflected within the bill.
That's a great question. And I hope a lot of you have outside scholarships that you've secured. So they're very, I don't want to say very clearly, but they would show up very clearly on your award letter as outside scholarship. Now, the question that we get most frequently is, hey, I've been awarded a scholarship. I know that I've got, I'll just use $1,000 as a nice round number. Know that I've got $1,000 coming from a foundation. It's not coming till August. What do I do? In that case, send us documentation of the scholarship that you have been offered. Send us, it could be an email that the foundation or group or whoever the scholarship provider is. If it's an email or a letter that they sent you saying, hey, congratulations, you've been awarded $1,000. Send us a copy of that letter or email, and we will use that to add an award onto your award letter to show that we're expecting to receive that scholarship. And if you do that and we get it on your award letter, it'll impact your bill immediately so that we're not waiting until August or September for the check to arrive. So if you have been awarded an outside scholarship, please communicate that to FINAID. That's FinAid. It's like financial aid, but shortened. finaid@oglethorpe.edu. If you can tell us who you are, that you want to communicate an outside scholarship, and send us that documentation, we'll add it to your record.
And then we've got a couple questions about what needs to be repaid. So in terms of loans, and also what we've labeled as a grant.
Yeah, that's a good question. I appreciate the person who asked it. So thankfully, Oasis is trying to help you out here. Everything that is in this kind of first bucket that's labeled scholarships and grants, these are awards that are helping to pay your education costs that you do not have to repay. Anything that is down in the loans bucket, you can expect to start repaying those. Now, most loans you start repaying 6 months after you're no longer in school. And I say it that way because for a very specific reason. It's not 6 months after you graduate, because if you graduate and you immediately go back into a graduate program, or you start seeking another degree, you continue to be enrolled towards a degree. It's 6 months after you're no longer enrolled that you have to start repaying your loans. And anything in this second bucket that shows up as loans on your award letter, you can expect to repay those. Now, who's repaying them depends on who borrows them. Some of you have been able to use Parent Plus loans, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. In the case of a Parent Plus loan, the borrower is the parent. So the parent starts repaying those when the student's no longer enrolled. But education loans in general, you start repaying after you're no longer enrolled, and the loans will show up in kind of this second bucket. But essentially everything that's labeled as a scholarship or grant is something you will not be repaying. Those are just helping to reduce your costs.
And speaking of parents, guardians, other support members, if there is someone who is going to be paying the bill or part of the bill that is not the student, what is the best way to go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Teresa, I don't know about you, but that sounded like a really good transition into shifting away from the financial aid and over into the payment portal. And, this session is for you guys. If you want to revisit something, we can. But what I'm going to do is I am going to use Oasis to navigate over to the payment portal. So over here on the left, you should have all the things that you've got access to. Quite honestly, you probably have more access than I do as the student. But I am going to shift to the student finance portion, and I'm going to go to the make a payment section. And actually, the make a payment screen is kind of the landing page to both make a payment, but also to view your statement. There is a new payment center that our business office has put together that, aside from being a portal to make payments, also is going to be where you go to look at your statement. So I'm going to continue out there. Now, I will say that students, when you're logged into Oasis, when you shift over to the payment center, it is going to check your credentials through your Oglethorpe email address. So you need to have your username and password for your Oglethorpe email address to make your way into this payment center. And it's done that way. It's done that way to simplify things so that you don't have to have a bunch of different logins, but also to authenticate who you are and to keep your account secure. From here, the question at hand was, how do other people come in here and gain access to this? So the first person who's going to have access to this portal initially is the student, and the student alone. Once the student logs into this payment portal, they can come over here to authorized users and essentially grant access to anyone that they would like to have access to their account. Now, students, there are two levels of access. And Teresa, if I'm incorrect, please by all means pipe in and correct me. But students, you would enter the email address of anybody who you would like to grant access to your account. When I was saying two levels of access, I was kind of referring to this question right here. Would you like this person to view your payment history and account activity, which essentially means, can they look at all the payments that have been made, and can they look at your statement? Yes or no. Yes means that they can look at all of that. No means that they can only come in here to make payments. They can't look at anything else. So students, you are going to be the gatekeepers of other people coming in here to make payments and take a look at your account. When you continue from here, it's going to kind of give you a disclaimer to let you know, what you are granting access to, when you're doing it. When you agree, it is going to send an email to that person and allow that person to set up their own login information. Um, if you are granting login information to a parent, parents, you will come to essentially kind of a different way, a different portal into this same system, which let me see if I can. Let me see if I can open up another tab. I might not be able to because, well, it's relatively self-explanatory. Parents, you would get you get that email, you would set up your own login credentials, you would then be able to log into this same site, come to the same kind of homepage for your student, and then you would be able to, from here, view the activity of the student's account, enroll in payment plans, make payments. You would be able to do that independently. But again, the student is the gatekeeper, so the student is the first person who's going to be able to come in here and make this access work for others. So once somebody is in here, you can view activity. Essentially is displaying the activity on the student's account. The activity, essentially the bill. Um, in this example, the bill is very condensed. There's essentially just one charge that's on here. But students, you would log in here and you should see the tuition and fees that I described at the very beginning of the webinar. You should see essentially a listing of what is making up your charges. You should also then see the financial aid that is showing up to help reduce your charges, to help pay for your costs. I tell you what, actually, I'm going to toggle back over to Oasis briefly because I did want to highlight something. So one of the questions that we get is about aid that makes its way over is pending. So students, parents, if you are seeing that some of your aid, you're expecting to see it over in your balance, but you're noticing it's not showing up, there may be very good reasons for that. Actually, you know what? The screen that I want is not going to be. So my apologies. Let me get back over to the payment center. Essentially what I was getting at is when you go to the account activity, you may find that with some of your financial aid awards that there may be a message out in the right margin, and that message is giving you a warning as to why that award might not be showing up on your student statement. So for some of you who are receiving federal need-based aid, like a Pell Grant or a subsidized Stafford loan, there may be a message on there about verification. Verification is something that the Department of Education selects probably 30 to 35% of FAFSAs nationwide for this process. You haven't done anything wrong, but once your FAFSA has selected, we need to get you through this process to secure your federal need-based aid. So if you see that note next to your financial aid, verification may be the reason you're not seeing your aid reflected in your balance. If you meant to accept your Stafford loans and you just completely do not see your Stafford loans mentioned here, the answer might be going back to My Awards and Oasis and seeing if you've accepted them. More often than not, that's the case, is that students just haven't accepted Stafford loans that they may intend to do. If you have a message on there about a requirement of 12 hours, most of our awards require enrollment in 12 credit hours. If you see any message about there about not being enrolled in 12 credit hours, check your schedule and talk to, you might need to talk to your advisor. Although quite honestly, I think your advisors are making sure you're registered for 12 hours. You probably won't see those messages. But when you go to view account activity, you as a student, you in your account should see more description, more detail here that pertains to your account specifically.
I'll make a quick note about those who might not have a full schedule yet. If you don't have a full schedule, likely you're missing one of two things. either Core 101, which we are adding more sections to, and so that will get added automatically, or we still need you to take your math placement exam. So if you haven't taken your math placement exam, we don't know where to put you in what is a major gateway course for most of our STEM majors. So if you're concerned because you don't have enough classes on your schedule, let us know and we'll let you know if that is one of those issues.
Yeah, thanks for that, Katie. That's definitely a major announcement in terms of this topic. So, students, families, if you are in either one of those scenarios, if you go to look at your bill right now, it might look kind of bizarre because you might have a charge for tuition that's lower than what I stated because you're not quite yet at full hours, and all of your awards might have that warning about 12 hours. So if that's what you're seeing on your bill, then your solution is to keep working with your admission counselor and get those checklist items taken care of for registration. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead just for a moment here and say that if you need to export your account activity, this would be a good place to do it. If some of you are drawing funds from a 529 account, or you need to essentially prove that you have education expenses to validate a withdrawal from an account, this might be a good place to look, because if you're able to get a PDF, this should show that your student has tuition and fees and essentially, qualifying education expenses. So if you need documentation to show that your student has those expenses, this might be a good place to look. I am going to go back to home. So, I mean, when you're taking a look at your balance and, you've got things to where you anticipated them to be, and you start taking a look at what your payment options are, payment options basically boil down to one of three main ways. And there are other ways to pay your balance, but most of our families are looking at paying their balance in one of three, kind of ways. One of them is to make a one-time payment for the semester. So when you've got your net balance to, like I said, where everything looks good, you could very simply click on make a payment. Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you can schedule a date for the payment. It doesn't have to be instantaneous.
You can schedule a day for your payment, correct? The only caveat is if it's a payment plan installment payment, you can only schedule it before the due date. You can't schedule it for after. So if the payment was due July 15th, you couldn't put in July 16th.
Perfect. So you could come in here to make a payment for the semester. You could enter your date. I'll go ahead and use this as an opportunity to say, again, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, but the due date for fall tuition to either satisfy your balance through one of the three ways I'm about to describe is August the 13th. And I'll come back to that to make sure that we hammer that home. But August the 13th is the date that we're looking for accounts to be settled for the fall. So if you're making a one-time payment to either take a big bite out of the balance or to satisfy it outright, you'd select your date, you'd select your amount, you would continue to identifying your payment method. I mean, quite honestly, from this point, I would imagine this probably looks very similar to what you're using to take care of other bills in other arenas. The one thing that I will say, though, is when you go to select your payment method, if you are paying with a card, whether that be a credit card or a debit card, there is going to be a fee associated, a transaction fee associated with using a card. And I believe, Teresa, I'm so sorry. What's the percentage?
2.85%.
So paying with a card is going to add 2.85% to the amount that you are paying. So I'd be adding, what is that, 28.50 to my transaction example that I've got here. That's essentially part of what we have with our vendors. However, if you have the option to make a payment with an electronic check, that you will not find that transaction fee. The transaction fee of 2.85% is only on cards that you will use. So if you were going to make a payment with a debit card, try instead using an electronic check, because that's going to save you that transaction fee. So one-time payment, certainly one of the ways that some of our families choose to satisfy their balance. Another way that a lot of our families will take care of their balance for each semester is to enroll in a payment plan. So enrolling in a payment plan, when you come in here, you should probably just see fall of 2021, because I think this follows your account activity. So you should only have charges for fall of 2021. It's going to give you, the option for setting up either 6 equal monthly installments, 5 equal monthly installments, or 4 equal monthly installments. And I'll go ahead and come right back to that word monthly. So this is going to divide the balance that you've got for the fall semester equally among 6, 5, or 4 months. We'll drill into the details of one of these plans. So you will see that it's fixed dates. Teresa, I believe it's the 15th of each month. Is that correct for installment payments?
Yes, sir.
Got it. So if you were to choose the 6-month installment option, for instance, it would spread your fall balance into 6 equal monthly installments. You'd be paying the 15th of each month, July through, December. Now, there's no interest associated with setting up a payment plan. The one thing that you will see is a setup fee. So if you set up a payment plan, it will come with a flat fee of $55, and that's a flat fee of $55 regardless of the amount of the installment. So essentially, you'll have the option here to set up a payment plan based on whatever balance you've got. Your details here certainly would be consistent with your account, give you the amount of the installment payments per month. And then if there is a payment that's made late, then you would incur a $25 late fee for each late payment. Teresa, was there anything that I missed or that you wanted to give some more detail on?
Maybe just to add, you do have to go in and select this each term. It's not blanketed and it doesn't roll over, so you would want to do this at the beginning of each semester.
That's a great point. Yeah. So the payment plan, exactly. If you essentially were looking to take the year's worth of charges, fall and spring combined, and spread it into a payment plan, you'd have one payment plan for the fall, and then you would set up another payment plan for the spring. So each semester you'd like to do a payment plan, you would set it up for each semester, and it only lasts one semester.
I've got some great questions in the chat when you guys are ready for them.
Let's go for it. Yep.
So we've got some questions about 529 plans. If people have 529 plans, can they set up payments directly between the accounts?
I believe if there is a routing number and account number associated with your 529 plan that the holder of your 529 funds will provide, I don't see why you couldn't add that as a payment method. So I feel like if it's all right with the financial institution where your 529 funds exist, then yes, you could use that as a payment method.
I will just add to that. I would say 9 out of 10 times you're going to want to go to that provider and just request the funds. They usually want just a statement from Oglethorpe and they send a check directly to the school. That's what the majority of the 529s do. So request the funds and then they send Oglethorpe a check.
And on our website, we have where that check can be sent to. It's sent to the office of the controller at our address. Then we've got some questions about loans. If someone decides to decline Stafford loans this year, would that have a negative impact on their next year's financial aid application?
No. No, whether or not you accept loans for one term has very little to do with your eligibility for future terms. So if you wanted to accept your loans for the fall and reject them for the spring, you can do that. If you want to flip that and reject them for the fall, use them for the spring, you can do that. If you want to reject them for this year and use loans next year, you can do that. There are kind of different variables at play here, but generally speaking, we can take things one term at a time. So yes. Now you would need to apply for loans. One thing that I will say is that you cannot carry loans over, meaning if you reject your Stafford loans this year, they will not be there. Plus, you won't be able to do freshman plus sophomore, loans together in your sophomore year. The offering of Stafford loans you see on your award letter is for this year only. So if you reject them, it means you're rejecting them for this year. You can still use Stafford loans next year, but they won't build on each other.
And on a similar note, do loans show up on the credit report during the time the student's in school?
Yes, they do. So if we're getting questions about loans, that was another transitional point. Whoever's sending these questions, thanks for your timing. That was going to be the third payment method that I was going to mention, were additional education loans. So I mentioned the Stafford loans, and I'll talk a little bit about some other types of loans. But the question at hand, do they show up on your credit report? Yes, they will show up on your credit report. They'll show that you are in deferment. Deferment essentially means that you're in school and that you're not, or that you're in a position where you're not responsible for actively paying. So they'll show up on a student's credit report. They won't necessarily be helping the student's credit history, because the help comes when the student starts repaying them and shows that they are repaying funds that they've borrowed. So it's not going to help. It's not going to hurt either, but they will show up on the credit report. Parents, if you choose to seek out a PLUS loan, which is a loan for parents, or if you co-sign on a loan for a student, the loans will also show up on your credit reports. Same thing, it'll probably show that the student is in deferment. It's not necessarily going to have an adverse effect, but they will show up on your credit report if you are either parents, if you're seeking out a PLUS loan, or if you're co-signing. Again, feels like a natural transition point. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the types of loans that you can seek. Hopefully you all saw me switch to a different tab in my browser. But what I've done is I'm going to start by talking about PLUS loans. So I mentioned a little bit about them. So if you've taken a look at your Stafford loans and you've decided that after accepting your Stafford loans, you still want to seek out more education loans to help pay for your balance, there are 3 loans that I immediately think of for students and families to consider. The first one is called a PLUS loan. That's for, I keep mentioning, that's for parents. What would happen if a parent wanted to borrow a PLUS loan? Is the parent would come to studentaid.gov, and they're going to be asked to log in. Now, I want to emphasize this. The person who logs in to studentaid.gov is also the person who is the borrower on the application. In other words, if a parent comes here looking to seek a parent loan, the parent who wants to borrow the loan needs to be the person who signs in. It can't be the student. If the student signs in, it's going to look like the student is the parent, and we can't use that application, basically. So parents, if you want to use a parent loan, you're the one who has to come in here and log in. Now, when you log in, this is the same login that you use to sign the FAFSA electronically. It's the exact same one. So you can find your FSA ID, then that is what you will put here. I'm going to go ahead and log in quickly. I hope I remember this correctly. Okay, so parents, you would log into studentaid.gov. And if your intention is to come here and seek out a parent loan, then you would select I'm a parent. You would apply for a Parent Plus loan, which is this 4th bullet point. And the last part that I wanted to make sure that I showed you is the type Oh, good. Actually, they've changed this to make it a little easier for you. Um, you want to make sure that you recognize and you apply as a parent of an undergraduate student. There's another type of PLUS loan that's only for graduate students. If you do that application, we can't use that either because your student's not yet in the graduate program. So you would want to make sure that you are identifying yourself as the parent of an undergraduate student. So um, once you get to that point, it's essentially just an application. Parents, what you're applying for here is a credit-based loan. So by filling out this application, the Department of Education will run your credit. They'll let you know if you're approved or declined for the loan. If you're approved for the loan, then it's, I don't want to say open-ended, but you can use the loan to borrow all the way up to cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is the balance you see on your statement. You can also use it for books. You can use it for personal expenses. You can use it for travel expenses. So you can use it for more than just what's on your statement. The PLUS loan is, it looks like it is going to be lending at a fixed interest rate of 6.284% for this coming year. So that is what you can expect to see as you're making your way through. Now, parents, if you go through this process and you are not approved for the PLUS loan, it actually causes the student to become eligible for a slightly higher level of the Stafford loan. So one way or the other, the PLUS loan application will create some resource for you all to consider. There is another type of credit-based loan that the student can seek out. So if you know you want to go in the direction of a credit-based loan, but you feel like it needs to be the student who is the borrower, then what I would recommend is seeking what's called a private education loan. And a private education loan is going to be essentially with a private lender. It could be Sallie Mae, it could be SoFi, it could be Discover. There are dozens of private lenders out there. And what you would do in this case is the student would go out. I'm actually going to stop sharing. The student would go out to apply for the private loan. They would apply for it in their name. Now, the private lender is going to check the student's credit, and most students at this stage in their education, they're not going to have the credit history to be approved, so the student's going to be turned down. The lender should then offer the student a chance to add a cosigner, and if the cosigner is approved, it's the same kind of thing. I don't want to call it open-ended, but the student can use it for the balance that you see, plus books, plus travel expenses. There are other things that you can use the private loan for. You can also just use these loans to borrow just for your balance, but I do want to mention the fact that you can use them for something like books too. With a private loan, that is going to be in the student's name, and the student's going to start repaying that after college. Now, I know that not everybody on this webinar is from the state of Georgia, but I would imagine a lot are. If you're from the state of Georgia and you have unmet financial need, you can also seek something called the Student Access Loan, which is offered through the state of Georgia. It's only for Georgia residents, but that can be found at gafutures.org. And actually, we'll be sending an email out to students who are eligible probably next week, so you may receive some more direct communication and instruction on that. But those are some of the other student loan options that you'll have to take care of the balance. What would you need to do to make sure that's on your statement? You'd need to apply for one of those loans. You'd need to be approved. Once you're approved, then whoever the lender is, whether it's the Department of Education or one of the lenders I mentioned or the state of Georgia, they're going to send us Oglethorpe something that says you've been approved for this loan. We'll go in and confirm that you're coming to Oglethorpe, and from that point, we'll put the loan on your account. Now, if you have applied for either a private loan, well, actually any of the loans that I've mentioned, we've been getting a lot of loan applications in over the last week. So we're a few applications behind. So if you have applied for one of these loans and been approved for it, it's likely in our hands and you will soon see it on your award letter. If you need help applying for it, we're happy to help. So I think we've got about 8 minutes left, and I'd mentioned that I would talk or could potentially talk about things moving forward, but I get the sense we probably have a lot of questions. So let's just use up our last time with questions.
Of questions. We've been trying to work our way through as many as possible. I want to be clear that we are not purposefully not answering anyone's questions. If for some reason we are not able to get to yours in the next 10 minutes, that's why you have our email. We are super glad to help and to address anything one-on-one. We've had a couple questions about whether you can start paying back loans before graduation.
High five to whoever mentioned this question, because I think that this is what you just asked is a really, it's not talked about very much in the student loan conversation nationwide. The answer is yes, you can absolutely start repaying your loans while you're in college. And in doing that, you're going to help to reduce what you owe when you graduate, which reduces the amount that you have that the interest can build on. Is just overall beneficial for you if you can to make payments on your student loans while you're in college. So yes, you can absolutely do that. It may be a couple of weeks before you can. It takes a little while for the disbursements to get communicated, and you know, your when it comes to Stafford loans, your servicer to get assigned. But say like a month into the semester, a month beyond your first disbursement, yes, you can absolutely start making payments. Now, you don't have to. You become obligated to make monthly payments 6 months after you're done with school. But if you want to start making payments in October of your freshman year, again, high five across the webinar. Yes.
And on that same note, if someone wanted to prepay charges, for instance, wanted to go ahead and pay for their spring semester, is that possible?
I'll be happy to defer to Teresa, although I'm happy to answer. Your call, Teresa.
Yeah, absolutely. We always accept your payment at any time. If you just want to reach out to the business office, we can go ahead and apply that for a future term. But yes, we can definitely do that.
Let's see. Direct loan entrance counseling. What is it? When do they have to do it?
It's a great question. And it, honestly, if you're going through Oasis, you may see that on your checklist. So if you've accepted your Stafford loan, it's probably telling you to do a master promissory note and to do what's called entrance counseling. Those are two things you need to do with the Department of Education before we can go and get your loan, your Stafford funds. Basically, we're looking for you to get that done before we start dispersing funds. So let's say before September 3rd. We'll send you some pointed information on how you can do it, although Oasis is going to direct you as to where you can get that done. But if you can get it done before September 3rd, then that's great. I will say real quick, if you're looking on Oasis and you've done your promissory note and you've done your entrance counseling and Oasis is still asking you to do it, it's because we haven't set up your disbursement yet. There's no link between your record and the Department of Education until we set up your disbursement. So you may see that on your checklist until early September. But if you've done it, then kudos to you.
And we touched on this briefly. If someone is unable to make payments before the end of semester, they're late on making a payment. Is there an interest related? How does that work?
I'll go ahead and take that one. The fun one's about late fees. But no, we can go ahead and put the fee schedule link that is on the website somewhere in the chat box, but they would be subject to $100 per month late fee for anyone who's not enrolled in a payment plan, paid in full, or we want to work with you. So just reach out to our office and we'll see what we can do.
If you don't mind, Teresa, I also wanted to mention one of the really bits of urgency that we get around that is if you have a balance that you haven't paid or addressed and it comes time to register for the next semester, you won't be able to. So that is absolutely something you'll want to make sure your balance is taken care of in general. But if it's not and it's time to register, then you won't be able to register. So that's something you want to keep an eye on.
We have a couple of Georgia specific questions. Can I apply for the Secure Advance Loan through Georgia Futures?
Georgia Secure.
That's why I
I
asked it. I wasn't sure what it was referencing.
Yeah, I tell you what, if you want to email me at C Summers, it's my first initial and last name. So just like the C, I think it's on the Zoom, on my Zoom box. C Summers at oglethorpe.edu. Let me know if we're talking about the student access loan. Yes, you can apply for that through Georgia Futures. If we're talking about the Georgia National Guard loan, if you are have any intentions of serving for the Georgia National Guard, there's a loan out there, a service cancelable loan out there for you to consider. So there are some loans through Georgia Futures. The way that that was phrased, I'm not familiar with, but if you're talking about the student access loan, which you may be, gafutures.org is where you'll find the application, yes.
And then for outside scholarships where the scholarship's not going to be awarded until after the school year has started, can that still be applied to a first semester payment?
I mean, yes, the short answer is yes. If you set up a payment plan or you establish a loan or you make a payment for the fall and then you find out, say in October, that you've been awarded a scholarship, then yes, we can figure out what's going to make the most sense for you. Is it going to make sense for you to allocate it towards the fall and help out with your payment plan? Is it going to make sense for us to push that scholarship to the spring and just have it waiting there to reduce your spring? So yes. Now, I will also say that if we don't know, and if you don't know that that scholarship is coming, we'll need to go ahead and put a plan in place for you to take care of fall without the scholarship. And then if the scholarship comes in, that just makes your plan much easier.
See, I've got a couple questions about how federal work study works, and if they don't have it on their letter yet, if that's too late.
It's not too late. And you know what? Whoever asked this question, thank you, because this is federal work study is unique. It's unique in that it operates differently from anything else on your award letter. So any scholarship, grant, or a loan, when the semester begins, that should just make its way onto your account in its entirety. Work study is very different because work study is never going to show up on your statement, and I'll explain why. Work study is an opportunity for you to work on campus. It is not a requirement for you to work on campus. So if you have work study award on your award letter, it's up to you as to whether or not you want to use it. But we're not going to make you work. If you want to use work study, then what we will do is every student who's been awarded work study will receive an invitation to a work study orientation the first week of the fall semester. And that'll be between myself, the director of our career development office, and the head of our HR office. And we'll talk you through what work study means, how you seek work study jobs, and how you apply for work study jobs. If you've got work study on your award letter, you'll receive an invitation to that orientation. You will receive access to look at the work study jobs. Only work study recipients can look at those jobs. That's the special thing about kind of that pool of jobs. And then you receive the work study award through your paychecks. It doesn't go like on your account, it goes directly to you. If students, if you and your family's plan is to take your work study wages and pay your balance, know that that money is coming directly to the student and you need to make a payment towards your account. But that's essentially the way that work study is going to work. The last part of the question, no, it's not too late. The only thing I will say about work study is we always request as much as we can, but Oglethorpe receives a specific, and every school in the country receives a specific allotment from the Department of Education for federal work study. We never receive enough to completely award all of our students who are eligible. So no, it's not too late. If you're interested in work study, let us know in the financial aid office. We'll see if you're eligible first and foremost, because not everybody's eligible. If you're eligible, we'll take a look at whether or not we have funds left. And if both of those are positive answers, we'll try to connect you with the award.
Alrighty, we are at the end of our time. Unfortunately, time flies. I have copied all of our questions that have gone unanswered in the Q&A. Some of you may have different names on here than we have in our system, or might be anonymous. Please email me if so, or I'll just have to guess. So I thank you all so much for your time. I hope you guys found this really informative. And I really thank Chris and Teresa for your time this lovely Wednesday evening. And hope everyone has a great rest of their night.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you on campus.